A couple years ago, I made a switch from the Creative Grids rulers over to the Quilter Select rulers, and I gotta tell you, I have never been happier with a decision to get rid of some rulers and buy some new ones as I have been with this change. Hey friends, welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and in today's video, we are going to dive into all things rulers. I've got 5 ruler brands laid out in front of me that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about their marking, we're going to talk about their anti-slip properties, and then I'm going to let you know overall on a scale of 1 to 5, which one do I love and which one do I not love. So let's get right into it. So let's first talk about the 5 rulers that I've pulled to show you about. These are all rulers that I had in my sewing room that I felt like I could quickly demonstrate for each of you. I don't have every single brand, but I think all of these represent the different brands that are available on the market. I have an Omnigrid ruler, I have a Yeah ruler, I have one of the trim lock rulers from Fallon over at Be It Quilts, of course the Quilter Select ruler, and the Creative Grids ruler. Before we dive into the anti-slip properties, let's first talk about the markings that are on all of these rulers. The first thing that I'm going to point out is this beautiful ruler right here doesn't really have any markings on it. This is the ruler from Fallon, and I want to just talk about the marking or lack thereof that is on this. At the recording of this video, all of her rulers are designed to be more trim locks rather than rulers that you're going to measure and cut with. They're designed to do something different than any of the other ones that are laid out here. And for that reason, there's not really any markings on these. These rulers are designed to square up or trim things down to the size that this ruler is. Now, the one that I have laid out here was designed for FPP. She does have a 1/4 inch mark lined on either side of that template. But she also has square versions of these rulers that allow you to square up your blocks to that exact size and shape. And the way it works is you lay the template on your fabric and you just cut around all 4 sides. The unique thing about this ruler is the thickness is definitely thicker than any of the other rulers that you're going to see here. It's got a handle on top to make it easy to hold on to, and it helps to get your hand positioned away from the edge where you're going to be doing your rotary cutting. So for somebody that is a novice or a beginner with rotary cutting, or maybe doesn't have good coordination with that rotary cutter and you want to make sure they're not going to nick themselves, these rulers are wonderful. She has a wide variety of trim lock rulers, some that are designed to just cut strips of fabric. Those have a press that you can use. It's like a wood handle, and when you apply pressure to that wood handle, you've got some rubber grips underneath the ruler that come in contact with the fabric so they don't move at all, and your hand is definitely up and away from the edge of the fabric. You will need to measure your fabric on the mat as you would with most of these if you're going to do any cutting with those rulers other than the squaring up that it's intended to do. I did want to talk about these because it is a ruler that I have in my room, but it's not used the same way that the others are. Also, I want to point out that for the trim lock rulers, Fallon offers these in 4 different colors. This is the original color, the fluorescent green, but she also has a pink, a blue, and a clear. Keep in mind that they don't have markings on them, so you're really just buying them for whatever color you like to have. Since this one doesn't really have any markings, I am going to set it aside, and we're going to talk about these 4. We'll come back to this one when we talk about the anti-slip properties. Okay. So these next rulers, we're going to start with the Omnigrid ruler. This is a 1 inch by 6 inch Omnigrids ruler, and along this side as well as this edge, it ticks off every 1/8 of an inch. The 1/8 of an inches are a smaller indentation, a smaller line. The 1/4 inch indentations are a little bit bigger, and then the 1/2 inch is the biggest indentation. So you can quickly and easily find your nearest 1/8 inch mark. Additionally, Omnigrid has thought about the contrast aspect, and so what they've done is every little marking that they have on here, it has a yellow background with black on top of that yellow so that you can easily get to where you need to be. When I hold this up to a piece of white fabric, as I've done here, you can see those markings a little bit better. For me, the yellow kind of throws my eye a little bit, and so I don't love this marking system, but it does get the job done. This is the brand that I started off with when I first started quilting, but it is also the brand that I gave up when I found the Creative Grids rulers. So here's why I love the Creative Grids rulers. You have two sets of numbers. You have your whole numbers, which are in white, and you have your half numbers, which have these black dots. So it's really easy to find what you're squaring up to and what you're using. Also, they've given you lines on the ruler for your 45, your 30, and your 60-degree marks, which help you do a little bit more than you would be able to do with the Omnigrid ruler. Maybe the bigger Omnigrid rulers have the 45, 30, and 60-degree lines, but this one doesn't. Fair enough, though. It's a small ruler. The other neat thing that Creative Grids has done, and it kind of plays into the anti-slip, is they've got this frosted ledge around all four sides. On two of the sides, it's a 1/4 inch, and on the other two sides, it's a 1/2 inch. So on the sides where you have the whole numbers facing you and reading in the proper direction, it's a 1/4 inch. And then when you flip the ruler, this ruler is so slippery, it just jumped out of my hand. Did you see that? So on the other side, where you have the 1/2 inch marks, that frosted edge is a 1/2 inch. Now, the thing that's neat about this ruler is I can measure either at the whole number or the 1/2 inch number, but also my 45-degree, 30-degree, and 60-degree lines are repeated in white as well as black, so that if I'm putting something against a light fabric, I can use those black lines. But if I were to put it against a darker fabric, like this beautiful Banyan batik, where the black lines won't show up as well, I can use the white lines to do my marking, or even use the white lines to do my measuring. Now, the measurements around the edges are all in black, but they do have every 1/4 inch ticked off in a white mark. So you could still use those white lines on a darker fabric to measure. The next ruler we're going to talk about is the Quilter Select ruler. Let me show you the markings that are on this, because it's not the same, but it's a little bit more universal. So let's talk a little bit about the markings on this ruler and how you're going to read it. First, I want to let you know that this is not a ruler that is just for right-handed or left-handed people. These rulers are. If you remember, when we're looking at this, the rulers start the measurement on the right edge and count up going to the left. These are designed to be used by somebody who's right-handed, and if you need a ruler because you are left-handed, you have to make your brain work for right-handed rulers, or you have to buy a special one. But Quilter Select is a little bit different because they've taken that into account. This one ruler is universal. It can be used by somebody that is right-handed or left-handed. You're going to have a series of numbers that have a black background, and that black background is indicating that the numbers are starting on the right and going to the left. The numbers that have a transparent background are starting on the left and going over to the right. So it doesn't matter whether you are a righty or a lefty, this ruler is going to work for you. A few of the other things to notice on this ruler are just the ticks that help measure off every 1/8 inch in between those whole line marks, and everywhere where there is a 1/2 inch mark, that entire 1/2 inch area for the entire width of the ruler is identified with a dashed line. And of course, you also have your 45, 30, and 60-degree angle lines coming from both corners of the ruler. And finally, this is really cool, you have a quick reference mark at the 1/2 inch areas as well. We all know that this is your 1 inch and this is your 2 inch because we know how to read our ruler, but if we want to find just a quick 1.5 inch, it's right there. So at the top of the ruler, I can quickly find my 1, but in the middle of the ruler, I can find the half step. So if I'm looking for 1.5, I can just look into the middle of the ruler. If I'm looking for a whole number, I look up at the top so I can quickly get to what I'm looking for. And the same is true, by the way, for the left-handed measurements. They just don't have the black background. I do find that the contrast with these numbers and the color of the acrylic that it's made with is a really good balance. And for the most part, I can see all of my markings on just about everything. If I bring in that same dark fabric that I had before, because of the frostedness that's on here, and I know it doesn't look so great in camera, but in person it does, I can still see my black markings. I don't know why it's easier to see those from this ruler versus this one. I think it has to do with that frostiness that's on the back side. Maybe that it's a different color template and it just adds more to that contrast. Maybe it changes the color of the fabric underneath. Obviously, I would probably have a harder time using this ruler against some black fabric. This might be the one I would want to use if I were using black fabric. But otherwise, I absolutely love the thought and effort that's been put into this ruler. It makes it universal. I have some friends that are left-handed, and I know they can use my rulers without having to retrain their brain. It works. Last up is the Yeah Quilting ruler. This is one that was sent to me by a subscriber. She wanted me to test it out to see how it compared to the Quilter Select ruler. I just want to say a really quick thank you to Auntie L Handmade, we all know her as Lori, for sending this ruler off to me. I hadn't gotten around to buying any of the Yeah Quilting rulers, and she tossed this in the mail for me to test out. Okay, so we're talking about the markings on this rule, and right away I'm going to tell you one of the things that's different than all of these other ones is the color. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. They chose to make their rulers on this orangey acrylic, which does provide a pretty good contrast for the black markings that are on here. And when I put that ruler on top of dark fabric, I can still see the markings, but I feel like I can see them a bit better on some of the other rulers. This might just be my eyes that are having an issue with it, but the black against the orange doesn't provide as much contrast as the black on any of these, but it is still very usable. I'm going to tell you there's something on this ruler that the other ones don't have, and that is these little ticks all around the four edges. Do you guys see this? They did not just mark off every 1/8 of an inch. They marked off every 1/16 of an inch. So you're going to be able to get a much more precise measurement all the way around. Also, in each of these four corners, you're going to see a little notch. That little notch indicates an 1/8 of an inch. So if you just need a quick measurement for an 1/8 of an inch, that little square will get you really quickly. Now, this ruler does appear to be designed for somebody that is right-handed in nature, meaning all of the measurements are going to start on the right edge of the ruler. But if you're okay reading numbers backwards or upside down, you could probably make it work for a left-handed ruler as well. And I will say that trick is probably the same for any of the other ones that have markings, where it's only designed to be for somebody who is right-handed. If you're okay reading the numbers upside down or backwards, you could probably still use that ruler as a left-handed ruler, I think. This is a 2-inch by 6-inch ruler. There are no degree lines on it, but I don't think that's the intended purpose of this ruler. I think the intention of this ruler is really to do something more like what the Omnigrid's ruler is. It's just meant to be a small tool that you can use for cutting. And like I said, it has got those 1/16 of an inches all the way around all four sides of the ruler, which none of the other three have. So if I were to rate these in order of 1 through 5 based on marking only, how do you think they'd rate? Well, I'm going to tell you in last place is going to be Fallon's ruler, and that's only because it can't compete. It has no markings on it, really, because that's not what it's intended to be used for. But it is a good product, and we'll talk more about that in just a couple minutes. The next one that I would lay down in place number 4 is the Omnigrid ruler. I don't love the contrast on this. I don't really love the markings on it. It's not pleasing to my eye, but it's doable and it works. I do think in third position is going to be the Yeah Quilting ruler, and that's really, I think, more just because of the color and the contrast between the numbers and the orange, it's not as pleasing and easy on my eye as the other two. In second position, I'm going to give Creative Grids, which for a very long time was my number one ruler, but that got ousted by the Quilter Select ruler because this is universal and I can use it if I'm a right-handed or a left-handed. I don't have to buy an entire different set of rulers to accommodate my left-handed quilters. So my favorite ruler when it comes to marking is the Quilter Select. We're going to talk next about the traction or the anti-slip properties of these rulers. But before we do, I want to talk about that marking because I think it's important to highlight that everybody's eyes and everybody's brains works a bit differently. There are so many there are so many rulers on the market today with different markings, different colors that honestly, if the ruler is not making sense to you, if you are not understanding the information it's trying to tell you and you can't read the ruler, then don't go with it. Wait until you find the ruler that is visually showing you what you need to see, you understand what it's trying to say, and you can clearly see what it's trying to do on your different fabrics, even if that means that you have a ruler that's good for your dark fabric and a ruler that's good for your light fabric. So now let's get into the anti-slip because this is where things are going to change up a little bit. Now we're going to talk about those anti-slip properties, and what I'm going to do is the one finger test. What that means is I'm going to pick up a ruler, put it on a piece of fabric, and I'm going to use just one finger to move that ruler around, and I want to see how intact does the fabric and the ruler stay, because that's going to be indicative of whether or not that ruler is going to slip when I'm actually doing my cutting. So let's start with Fallon's ruler. I'm going to lay it down here and I'm going to put one finger on the ruler and just very lightly I'm going to move this around, and you can see that everywhere the ruler goes, that fabric is going with me. It doesn't matter how fast I'm going, how I'm whipping around, it's staying directly with that fabric. And I can even do like one pinky. Look at that. It's not going anywhere. And the reason for that is because on the opposite side, on the bottom side of each of her rulers, she has these sticky, grippy pieces of material that are on every single one of her rulers, and they provide just a lot of grip to your fabric. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure. It stays where it needs to stay, and you can just use the handle to quickly turn this around, which, by the way, is why I love her trim lock rulers. Because as I mentioned, she gives you a square ruler that is a specific size, and you can use this to square up all of your blocks as long as they needed to go to that square shape, like this size. If I'm going to use her square rulers to square up my half square triangle units, I've got my 45-degree lines on here. And so I can lay this down in a half square triangle unit, put that 45-degree line right on my seam, and then I can cut and then cut and then cut and then cut. And you can see I can just keep moving this around or move it around with the handle. I don't have to have a rotating cutting mat. I can just use this, and my hand doesn't get fatigued from having to have that cramped grip on top of the ruler when I'm squaring up, a million HSTs. So this is awesome. Next up is the Omnigrid ruler, and I've got it on my fabric, and you can see with that one finger test, this ruler is just kind of going all over the place. It is super slippery. If I try to apply pressure to this, the ruler still doesn't, oh my gosh, the ruler still doesn't even keep any grip on the fabric. So what that means is when I'm using a ruler that doesn't have any gripping on the back side of it, I need to make sure that I've got a stance with my fingers that are kind of locking that ruler into place. Let's talk about why that is. If you look at the underside of the ruler, it is the exact same material that is on the top side of the ruler. There are no grooves, there are no rough edges, there's nothing on the back side of this that's going to keep the ruler intact with the fabric. So honestly, this one can't even compete with the others because there's nothing on the back side of this that's going to hold it onto the fabric, whereas all four of the other ones have something. Next up is the Yeah Quilting ruler, and I want to do the one finger test, so I'm just going to put one finger on here, and you can see the fabric doesn't move with it when I do this very lightly, but if I just apply a little bit of pressure, it doesn't take much, that fabric stays with the ruler. I didn't have any pressure when I did those 3 fingers, so don't fault them on that one. Let's take a look at the underside of the ruler. What's giving it that clinginess is this finish that they have on the back side. Now, when I first got this ruler, it was a bit tacky to the touch, but it's not as tacky anymore. And I wonder if that is because it's kind of worn off as I'm touching and demonstrating and using it against the fabric. I feel like if I just took some water and maybe a mild soap, a mild detergent to the back of this, I could probably get some of those oils and maybe there's some dust on there and reclaim that tackiness. Either way, it doesn't take a lot of pressure. I feel like my hand would still be able to hold up to a lot of cutting and I wouldn't get that cramp. I don't have to have that awkward spider hold. So you can see with the 1 finger test with just a little bit of pressure, it stays right where it needs to go. You'll want to be careful because it's absolutely not a featherweight touch. It will slide off of the fabric a little bit, probably more so the longer you've had the ruler if you're not keeping it clean. Next up is the Creative Grids ruler, which was my ruler of choice for years. Let's do the 1 finger test. Oh, look at that. It's not holding on to anything. In fact, if I do an entire hand, 2 hands, it's not holding on to anything. It does have some rough patches on the back side that help kind of keep it from sliding around as much as this ruler that has absolutely no treatment. And what that means is what they've given you is basically these rough edges that are designed to keep the ruler from sliding easily when you're cutting it. It's supposed to stay in place, but it is not designed to hold onto the fabric. So if it slips, you're going to have a miscut. I can't even get that fabric to stay where it needs to go, but I can, with the right amount of pressure and the right amount of friction, get the fabric to dance under the ruler. If I had a nickel for the number of times I had a miscut because this ruler just went a little bit in my early days of quilting, I'd probably be able to buy several yards of fabric. So the last ruler up is the Quilter Select ruler, and I've got that laying on the fabric, and we're going to do our 1 finger test. 1 finger on the ruler and very light pressure. I'm barely touching it. We're even going to use the pinky, and we're going to go pretty quick. You can see the fabric is not moving at all. Like I can whip this around all day long and it's, well, it did move just a little bit, but if you're doing this while you're cutting, we probably need to talk because you shouldn't be doing that while you're cutting. Let me show you the underside of this ruler. Much like the Yeah Quilting ruler, there is a special finish that makes the bottom side of this ruler a bit frosted. And that, I think, adds to the contrast that you see on the printing. Also, I feel like the printing on this ruler is on the top, not on the bottom, whereas the other ruler here looks like it might be printed on the bottom, not on the top. Not sure. Either way, this finish on the back side holds up really well to this fabric. I have been using this ruler for about 2 years now, and the finish has not worn off. And I've done lots of touching on the underside of this, so my oils and dirt and all sorts of things are not causing that finish to wear off. It's held up absolutely wonderfully. I've got 5 rulers here, and it's time to rate them in order of 1 through 5 in their stickiness factor. I am going to say in first place position is Fallon's ruler, because that sucker is not going anywhere, and she's giving you a way that allows you to quickly turn your it's even trying to hold on to like the mat. I could move the whole mat with this thing. She's given you a way to hold on to the template so that you don't have to have any sort of special cutting mat. You can move your fabric with your ruler. Hands down, this is great. In second place, it's going to be my Quilter Select ruler. I think that is for very obvious reasons. For the 1 finger test, it has held up better than any of the other rulers. In third place, we're going to give Yeah Quilting a nice mention there because the finish on the backside is, I honestly think, almost as good as what's on the Quilter Select ruler, but it has not held up as well as the finish on the backside of the Quilter Select ruler. And that might be more for my own doing than anything else. I'm going to honestly tell you that when I got this ruler, I was trying to figure out what was on the back side. And so I was touching the underside of this ruler a whole lot. Oh, did you see that? I just threw it across the room. I did a lot of touching on the bottom side of this ruler. And so I think I might have introduced some oils and some other things that made this less grippy as time wore on. I have had this ruler for about 6 months or so. It was sent to me right after they launched their ruler line. So whenever that was, I've had it ever since then. So the test that you saw with the one finger today probably would have performed better had I cared for the ruler in the right way from the beginning. In the fourth position, it's going to be the Creative Grids ruler. And the reason why this gets the fourth position is because there is some amount of grip on the backside that'll help keep it a little bit in place, but it is not an anti-slip ruler. You can see with one finger, it's just kind of wiggling all over the place, but it's not wiggling or slipping as easily as the ruler that is in the fifth place position, which is the Omnigrid, and it has absolutely nothing on the bottom side. Now, when we're talking about the grippiness of our rulers, you need to understand that if you have a ruler that makes sense to your brain and you absolutely love the markings on, but it's sliding around a bit more than you like it to, there are a number of options out there that you can use to make that ruler not slide around as much. They have some true grip dots. I've heard of people putting some double-sided sticky tape on the bottom. I think there's even some spray adhesive or some sort of spray coating that you can put on the bottom side of it, which kind of makes it act a bit more like the Quilter Select or Yeah Quilting ruler. Or you can just put some of this stuff that Fallon has on her rulers on the underside of this. So if I have to rate these overall, based on the marking and the slippage, let's see how they all rank up. I'm going to tell you in first position is my Quilter Select ruler. 100%. Love that ruler. I love the markings. I love the anti-slip. Solid ruler. Highly recommend. In second position, I'm going to put the Yeah Quilting ruler because it doesn't really slip around as much as the others. The markings are easy to read, and if you ever need that 1/16 of an inch, this provides it where no other ruler that I have on my table currently does. In third place, I'm going to have a bit of a hard time with this. It really is going to be the Creative Grids ruler, but you see I kind of brought in the Fallon rulers because I feel like these are a tie for the third place. This one has all of the markings I could ever want minus the 1/16 of an inch, but no anti-slip properties. This one has all of the anti-slip properties I could ever want, but no marking. And so for this reason, I feel like the Creative Grids and the Fallon rulers are kind of both solid choices, but they each have their different purposes. I would not use these unless I was squaring up to just that one size. And if I was, then I might actually put it in the first place position. But I'd have to have a separate template for every single size I want to cut. So overall, we're going to put it in the third position. And the last position is going to be that Omnigrid ruler. Is it a ruler? Yes. Will it give me a straight edge? Absolutely. Can I measure with it? Yeah. Is it as good as its competitors? Well, I don't think so, but maybe you do. Let me know in the comments down below which of these rulers would be your #1 pick and which of these rulers would be in your last place position. I'd love to see how my ranking order rated to yours. Thank you, friends, so much for hanging out with me. I hope you found this ruler video helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.